Hello, everyone. Hello and welcome to this webinar at OPIT. I'm just letting everybody settle in. Okay, and thank you so much for joining this webinar. At OPIT, today we're going to talk about cybersecurity with Professor Tom Vazdar, so lessons from history. And we're going to learn everything about fraud and how these tactics still have an impact today. So just a few words, and then I leave the floor to Professor Tom Vazdar. My name is Greta. I'm head of marketing and admissions at OPIT, and the webinar today will be conducted as follows. First of all, Tom, after my brief introduction, will give you this lesson, which is a masterclass. Tom is our area chair at OPIT for cybersecurity. Is also a professional, has been working for many years in AI and cybersecurity as an AI and cybersecurity strategy. Is CEO at Risk and has a plenty of professional experience that he can talk to with you later. Just a few words about OPIT, then I leave the floor to Tom, and then we're going to talk about, again, the program. So in between Tom lessons and my continued speech, you can ask questions about cybersecurity. Any curiosity you may have, you can ask them in the chat here. Okay, just a few words about OPIT and our mission and who we are. So OPIT is an institute that has a final aim, the idea of unlocking progress and especially employment on a global scale by bringing top quality education. Education is also affordable in one specific field, which is technology. Technology is actually now spread in any sector. So nowadays, having a good grasp of what is tech and specifically what is AI and what is cybersecurity can give you a lot of insights on how to deal in the different sectors you may be working in. OPIT is a specific institution, and we have some key traits that set us apart from others. First of all, we are accredited at the European level, and we are based in Malta and recognized in Europe and also outside Europe in the US and Canada. We are online, and so fully online and flexible, but at the same time, our support is always available. I was just talking with Tom about his interaction with students. So you meet the professors every day and you talk with your professor, with your tutors, and also the coordinator. So you have a support always available there. As I said, we're focused on technology. So we have degrees, bachelor and master of science degrees, specifically focused on technology, and we're going to talk about them in the second part of the webinar. And these degrees are career aligned. So we have professors like, for instance, Tom, that comes from the business, and he has an expertise in both the academia but also the business. So everything, our programs are designed and aligned to what companies would need today and tomorrow. And finally, we are inclusive and affordable, and I'm going to show you a little bit more about that in the second part of the webinar. But first and foremost, what is one of our key strengths is our faculty. So we have a rector, Francesco Profumo, has been Minister of Education in Italy, is the one who is behind this institution. He really wanted to create an institution that was focused on what is needed today, and to do that, we actually have a faculty. There is a full list of faculty on our website that, as I said, comes from both the professional and business world and the academia. So we have people working for Amazon, for instance, or banks, or Microsoft, Morgan Stanley, etc. And as I said, Tom himself is an example. He can tell you a little bit more about what he's been doing so far and why it's so important to have also lessons from people like himself. So without any further ado, I'm going to leave the floor to Tom with his lessons from history, how fraud tactics from the 18th century still impact us today.
Well, thank you, Greta, for this introduction. There is nothing more to add about myself. You said everything perfectly. So I just want to welcome everyone to this session. It's going to last approximately 1 hour. So what we're going to discuss today, we're going to dive into the world of fraud and world of fraud tactics throughout history. And we will discuss how deception, how manipulation, exploitation, how have all evolved over time. And understanding these tactics gives us insight into modern fraud schemes, and also it helps us anticipate some of the future threats. So let's get started. Let me switch my slides. And now I'm in the bubble. So excellent, everything works. So let's get started. So fraud. Fraud is really not a new phenomenon. Fraud has been present throughout history, constantly evolving alongside society. So since we are now in the 21st century, the question is, are we really dealing with new threats, or are they just old scams with new tools? And fraud is really a fascinating topic because it exposes the vulnerabilities in our systems. And we're speaking both technological and human vulnerabilities. And it reveals how people exploit trust, how people exploit systems, and also loopholes for personal gain. And this really makes fraud prevention a multidisciplinary challenge because it's not just about technology, it's also about psychology, it's about law, it's also about ethics. And we must understand both the fraudster's mindset and the systems they exploit to create effective countermeasures. So let's establish some foundational points. Well, first thing, fraud is not a modern intervention. Fraud has existed for centuries. So whenever there has been something of value to take, someone has devised clever ways to take it also. The 18th century was particularly fertile. It was a fertile ground for financial scams, for identity deception, and also for forgeries. And this was also an era of rapid economic change for new financial instruments and also for expanding global trade. So all this was creating the perfect condition, the perfect storm for innovative fraud schemes. And what fascinates me the most, and also what I want to emphasize today, is how directly these historical fraud tactics parallel modern cybercrime. And when I first started researching this topic, when Greta approached me, with the idea, for this masterclass, so I started immediately researching, what could we talk about this topic, because it always fascinated me. And I was struck by how many new cyber threats actually follow playbooks that were written centuries ago. The medium has changed dramatically from handwritten letters to emails, from face-to-face confidence tricks to some elaborate online personas, but the core deception strategies remain remarkably similar. So understanding all these historical parallels, it helps us see through the technological complexity to the fundamental human dynamics at play. So today in this lesson, we will explore several famous historical fraud cases, 3 cases, and we will track also their evolution into modern threats. And we will see how techniques that were developed to manipulate 18th century investors evolved into today's cryptocurrency scams. We will see how identity deception tactics that were used against royalty, how they transformed into business email compromise attacks. And we will also see how advanced fee fraud perfected in the 1700s, like how it became the blueprint from countless internet scams. So, why exactly should cybersecurity professionals care about historical frauds? Well, there are 4 key reasons. First reason is understanding past frauds, and this helps us recognize modern scams. So, when you understand the fundamental patterns of deception that have persisted for centuries, you develop a kind of fraud radar that can detect new threats even when they're disguised with cutting edge technology. And many of you who are listening to this session, you have probably had that moment of clarity when you spotted a phishing attempt that other people might have missed. This is that intuition that comes from understanding the timeless patterns of fraud. The second thing that we have is fraud techniques, they have evolved with technology, but the core deception tactics remain the same. And this is perhaps the most important insight for our field. We often get caught in the technical details of new attack vectors, But at the same time, you're missing the underlying social engineering strategies that make them effective. So, for example, when we see a deepfake technology being used to impersonate CEOs in video calls, like in the now already famous deepfake video from February of last year in Hong Kong, that's just a high-tech version of the imposter scams that have existed for centuries. So the delivery mechanism has changed dramatically, but the fundamental deception hasn't. Third, many historical frauds prompted early legal and security measures that are still relevant today. The financial regulations that emerged after the South Sea bubble of 1720, and this is a case that we will discuss in the next slide, this has established principles that still govern our markets. Anti-forgery techniques developed to combat the 18th century counterfeiters evolved into the security features of modern currency and documents. And the investigative methods that were pioneered by early fraud detectives, they laid the groundwork for modern digital forensics. And finally, fourth, learning from past mistakes helps us improve modern fraud prevention. History gives us a laboratory of test cases showing what worked and what failed in combating fraud across different technological eras. And this perspective is invaluable when we are designing security systems that need to remain effective as technology continues to evolve. So let's talk first, let's look at our first major historical case, and that's the South Sea bubble of 1720. This was one of the first major stock market crashes in history. So what happened here was really extraordinary. The South Sea Company, that was the trading company. Their stock soared from at that time from £100 to 1,000 British pounds in just a few months before catastrophically collapsing. And this was not just financial bubble. It was basically a masterclass in manipulating investor psychology through hype and through speculative frenzy. And the company directors made some extravagant promises about profits from South American trade, despite having little actual business activity to justify these claims. And they created an illusion of value that separated investors from rational decision making. During this period, financial fraud evolved to exploit new investment opportunities in financial instruments. And the emergence of stock markets created some fertile ground for manipulation, for insider trading, for pump and dump schemes, and much more. And what's really fascinating about this case is that it ensnared even the brightest minds of the era. Sir Isaac Newton himself, and arguably he was the greatest scientific intellect of his age, he lost a fortune that was equivalent to millions in today's money. And this should be really a sobering reminder to all of us in the cybersecurity field that intellectual brilliance, it offers no immunity to well-crafted deception. So anybody can be a victim. And Isaac Newton later remarked, and this is his famous quote, he said, "I can calculate the movement of stars, but not the madness of man." And just remember this quote when you're designing security. If you're in the cybersecurity industry, just remember this because you need to account this part for human psychology. Not only technical vulnerabilities, but also human psychology needs to be part of your overall security design. And this case of the South Sea bubble, it also teaches us about the importance of transparency, the importance of verification. So these are concepts, they're at the heart of modern cybersecurity. And this scheme worked because investors had no reliable way to verify the company's claim about its South American trading prospects. And we're talking here also about the information asymmetry. And this is where one party has significantly more information than the other. So this has created the perfect conditions for fraud. And this is exactly the dynamics that enable many modern cyber attacks. where victims make decisions based on limited or manipulated information. And when we implement verification protocols and zero trust architectures in cybersecurity, we are here really addressing the same fundamental vulnerabilities that were exploited 3 centuries ago. And let's examine now the modern parallels to the South Sea bubble. So on the left side, we see, on the left side of the slide, we see the historical fraud elements. So promises of extraordinary returns, market speculation frenzy, propaganda through printed pamphlets, and also word of mouth hysteria. And now look at their modern equivalents on the right. So Ponzi schemes promising impossible profits, cryptocurrency and tech stock bubbles, manipulative media coverage, and social media influencer promotions. And all the similarities, they're striking, are they? Consider the cryptocurrency market fluctuations that we have witnessed over the past few years. Many investors were drawn in by promises of revolutionary technology and some astronomical returns, often with little understanding of the underlying assets. Social media influencers and targeted advertising campaigns, they all created the same kind of information cascade that pamphlets and coffeehouse gossip generated back in 7020. The technology has changed dramatically, but the psychological triggers and the trigger, we're talking here about this FOMO trigger, it's called fear of missing out. This is still applicable today, fear of missing out. Social proof, allure of easy wealth, quick money, quick winning, they all remain exactly the same. And as professionals in the cybersecurity industry, for us, it's important to understand all these psychological vulnerabilities, equally important as understanding technical exploits, because we like to talk about technical exploits, but the human layer is very vulnerable, and we need to understand the human layer. The warning at the bottom of this slide captures a timeless principle. Beware of investments based on speculation rather than fundamentals. And this applies directly to how we evaluate security solutions. So in this field of cybersecurity, we constantly face new products making extraordinary claims about their capabilities. And the parallels between investment bubbles and security theater, they're worth noting. They both involve decisions that are driven more by hype than substantive value. And the final point about the fear of missing out, it's still driving investment scams today. So this reminds us that emotion remains the most reliable vulnerability for attackers to exploit, regardless of technological sophistication. It's always emotion that they target. Let's look at another case. And this is the case of identity deception from back from pre-revolutionary France. So this is the case that's called the Diamond Necklace Affair. And this fraud, it combined several elements that should be of interest to us. So the elements were impersonation, forgery, and some sophisticated social engineering. 1784, just think of that. Same tactics as today. So the confidence trick began with some ambitious schemer. The guy's name was Jean de la Motte, and he fooled Cardinal Rohan at the time into believing that he was buying an extremely expensive diamond necklace for Queen Marie Antoinette. The cardinal thought that this purchase would earn him the queen's favor and political advancement. And the genius of this fraud was in its layered deceptions. De la Motte forged letters supposedly from the queen, and he arranged a nighttime meeting where an accomplice impersonated Marie Antoinette, and it created an elaborate story about why the transaction needed to remain secret. So does that sound familiar? And this is the 18th century version of the business email compromise attack that we see today. This is where attackers impersonate executives to authorize fraudulent transactions. And the techniques have evolved, but the structure of the attack remains remarkably consistent. And what makes this case particularly significant is its demonstration of how identity fraud can have consequences far beyond immediate financial loss. This scandal, it severely damaged Queen Marie Antoinette's reputation, despite her complete innocence in the affair. And the public, they're already suspicious of the Queen, and the necklace scandal reinforced the perception that she was extravagant and that she was dishonest. And historians believe that this contributed to the negative public sentiment that ultimately led to the French Revolution. And this illustrates a principle that's equally valid in modern cybersecurity. Reputation damage often exceeds direct financial losses in identity based attacks. When we are assessing risk and when we are designing protections, we also need to consider these broader organizational and societal impacts. We can see the direct modern parallels to the diamond necklace affair. So, we already said business email compromise, and this scam follows essentially the same playbook as the 1780s fraud. And in this attack, fraudsters impersonate company executives, typically by spoofing or by hacking email accounts. Then they use that assumed authority to direct employees to transfer funds or to share sensitive information. And just as this Cardinal Rohan at the time was deceived by forged letters, supposedly from the Queen, modern employees are tricked by convincing emails that appear to come from their CEO or their CFO. The technology has changed, but the attack vector, exploiting trust in authority figures, this attack vector remains identical. Just think of that. 300 years, identical threat vector. The second parallel is digital impersonation through deepfake technology. This one represents the evolution of the same basic technique used in the diamond necklace affair. In 1785, they needed a physical look-alike to briefly impersonate the queen in a dimly lit garden. Today's fraudsters, they can use AI to generate convincing video and audio of anyone, creating impersonations that are far more scalable and harder to detect. And I have seen cases where executives' voices were convincingly simulated in phone calls requesting urgent wire transfers. And this technology is making social engineering attacks increasingly sophisticated, but the core strategy would be immediately recognizable to the 18th century con artists. The third parallel, identity forgery through phishing, continues the tradition of fabricating credentials to establish false trust. Today's phishing attacks use counterfeit login pages and security notifications to harvest credentials. The warning at the bottom of this slide captures the timeless defense against these deceptions. Always verify identities and communications through trusted channels. And this principle has been effective against identity fraud for centuries and remains our most reliable protection. So our next historical case is the Spanish prisoner scam from the late 1700s. So this is a fraud so effective that variants of it continue to thrive in the digital age, and the mechanics were straightforward. This is how it works. Victims received letters claiming to be from a wealthy prisoner, and this was very often at a time it was a Spanish nobleman who needed help to access their fortune. The scammer then promised a substantial reward for assistance. So what's the catch? So the victim needed to provide advance payments for bribes, for fees, or for travel expenses to help free the prisoner. Once these payments were made, the scammer would disappear, or it would just invent complications requiring additional payments. And what makes this scam particularly interesting from a cybersecurity perspective is its psychological sophistication. It didn't just appeal to greed, it combined financial motivation with the victim's desire to feel helpful, important, and also connected to someone of high status. The scammers created a compelling narrative that engaged victims emotionally and intellectually. And as they became invested in the story, their critical thinking diminished. And we see exactly the same psychological manipulation in today's social engineering attacks, where attackers craft narratives that bypass rational decision. And this is unbelievable that it's still happening today. The Spanish prisoner scam has historical significance as one of the earliest documented advanced fee frauds. And the basic structure promised a large reward contingent on a smaller upfront payment. It has proven remarkably adaptable across centuries and technologies. The advanced fee creates a sunk cost that makes victims more likely to continue investing as the scam progresses. And there are variants of this scam. So let's look on this slide where we show the modern descendants of the Spanish prisoner scam. So the most direct parallel is the infamous Nigerian prince scam. And you all probably heard about the Nigerian prince scam. It's also known as 419 fraud. And you may be wondering why 419 fraud. It's after the relevant section of the Nigerian Criminal Code. It's written in their legislation. It's Article 419. And these emails, Nigerian prince scam fraud, these emails, they follow almost exactly the same narrative structure as their 18th century predecessor. A wealthy individual needs help moving a large sum of money and promises a substantial reward in return for assistance. And the constancy of this basic fraud template across centuries is remarkable. And what's changed in primarily is the distribution method, from individually written letters to mass email campaigns, and the cultural details used to make the story plausible for contemporary victims. The second modern parallel, this is inheritance or lottery frauds. It operates on the same advance fee principle. Victims are told they inherited money from a distant relative, or they won a lottery they never entered but need to pay fees, taxes, or processing costs to receive their windfall. And these scams demonstrate how the fundamental structure of advanced fee fraud can be adapted to different scenarios while at the same time maintaining the same psychological hooks. The third parallel addresses victim psychology, which has remained remarkably consistent over time. Victims are lured by greed and the hope of an easy fortune. What has changed is primarily the scale and reach of these operations. The internet allows modern scammers to cast a much wider net at minimal cost, and making advanced fee scams economically viable, even with very low success rates. The warning at the bottom of the slide, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. It captured the timeless defense against these scams. Critical thinking and healthy skepticism, they remain our most reliable protections against both historical and modern advanced fee frauds. Okay, so as we see on this slide, the 18th century was incredibly fertile ground for various types of fraud beyond the major cases that we have already discussed. So let's just look briefly at each category and its modern equivalent. So first thing is, it's called quack doctors and miracle cures, were rampant. They were back in the 1700s. And these fraudsters, they advertised fake remedies as medical breakthroughs often using testimonials, pseudoscientific language, and appeals to exotic or secret knowledge. And today, we see the same tactics in online health scams, selling everything from miracle weight loss pills to fraudulent cancer cures. And the psychological levers, fear of illness, hope for some easy solutions, quick fixes, and trust in apparent expertise, they haven't changed at all. They're the same. Next is counterfeiting and forgery. There were also major problems in the 18th century. Um, Creating fake banknotes and identity documents, this was a sophisticated criminal enterprise that required specialized skills and required also equipment. The modern equivalents are identity theft and credit card fraud, and they operate in the digital realm, but they follow similar patterns. And both exploit the trust we placed in standardized tokens of value and identity. Next is imposters and identity theft. And there were another common 18th century fraud category. People would pose as nobility or heirs to gain social advantages, to gain credit, or direct financial benefits. Today's equivalent includes social media impersonation and catfishing, where fraudsters create false identities for similar purposes. And finally, there is lottery and investment scam, and this is something that existed even before modern financial markets were fully developed. The 18th century saw fake lotteries and Ponzi-style schemes that promised impossible returns, just equally as today's fraudsters promote, pyramid schemes and fake ICOs. ICO stands for initial coin offerings. We're talking about cryptocurrencies, so initial coin offerings. So here is a timeline of how fraud tactics have evolved across centuries while maintaining their core deception strategies. So in the 18th century, fraud primarily took the form of face-to-face cons and fraudulent letters. And these were relatively limited in reach, but they were often highly personalized. Fraudsters needed to be physically present for many scams or invest significant effort in correspondence. And this limited their potential victim pool, but it allowed for deeply tailored approaches based on direct observation of the target. So, fast forward to the 20th century, and financial fraud became even more sophisticated. The Great Depression exposed some massive fraud cases in banking and securities, and this was the birth of stronger regulations, but also more creative ways for fraudsters to bypass them. So during this period, financial fraud evolved to exploit new investment opportunities and financial instruments. And the emergence of stock markets, it created some really fertile ground for manipulation, for insider trading, and those pump and dump schemes. And fraudsters found ways to exploit market volatility. They found ways to leverage some deceptive practices to make quick profits while leaving unsuspecting investors at a loss. So, moving to the 19th century, we see how technological advances like the telegraph and mass printing, how they expanded fraud possibilities. So telegraph scams, they could reach victims quickly across great distances, while fake newspaper advertisements, they could target thousands of readers simultaneously. And this represents the beginning of the scale versus personalization trade-off that characterizes fraud evolution. As reach expanded, individual tailoring often decreased. However, new technologies created fresh opportunities for deceptions based on the public's trust in these communication channels. And one of the most infamous scams of the 20th century was the Ponzi scheme. And it was named after Charles Ponzi, who promised high returns on investments through international postal reply coupons. And while this scam was not the first of its kind, it really highlighted a new breed of financial deception that preyed on trust and the lure of high returns. Investors were initially paid with funds from new investors rather than legitimate profits, and this was creating an unsustainable model that eventually collapsed. And the failure of Ponzi scheme led to greater awareness of fraudulent investment models. But similar scams continue to appear today in different forms, such as modern cryptocurrency Ponzi schemes. The 20th century also brought telephone fraud and mass marketing scams, further expanding reach while changing how fraudsters establish credibility. The telephone allowed for real-time manipulation of victims through voice interaction, creating new possibilities for social engineering. Mass marketing through mail, mass marketing through television, and eventually early internet communications. They all enable fraudsters to reach unprecedented number of potential victims. And as financial fraud became more sophisticated, so did also regulatory responses. So in the United States, governments they introduced laws such as the US Securities Act of 1933 and also Securities Exchange Act of 1934 to curb fraudulent practices. And these laws establish greater oversight of financial markets, requiring companies to disclose financial information transparently. But even with all these regulations, fraudsters have continued to find ways to exploit regulatory loopholes, and this is making it an ongoing battle between law enforcement and criminal ingenuity. And with the internet, fraud took a massive leap forward. Identity theft, phishing, online Ponzi schemes, they all emerged, and criminals no longer needed physical presence. You know, they were able to operate globally with just a computer. And the digital age introduced new challenges as fraudsters leveraged online platforms to reach a wider audience and execute scams more efficiently. One of the first major waves of cyber fraud came with phishing attacks. So phishing attacks, they're deceptive emails designed to trick individuals into revealing some sensitive information, such as their password or their financial details. So in the 21st century, where we are now, email phishing, social media fraud, and deep fakes, they all represent the current technological frontier of deception. And the internet has dramatically reduced the cost of reaching potential victims while creating new opportunities for automated, artificial intelligence enhanced, and also highly scalable fraud operations. Online marketplaces and digital banking, they also created new vulnerabilities. So cybercriminals, they have exploited weaknesses in online payment systems to conduct fraudulent transactions, while hacking techniques such as credential stuffing, they allowed attackers to gain access to user accounts. The anonymity of the internet further emboldened criminals, and it was making it difficult for law enforcement. Not it was, it's still making it difficult for law enforcement to track and to prosecute cyber fraudsters. And as financial transactions moved online, identity theft became one of the fastest growing types of fraud. And this was leading to the development of cybersecurity measures like two-factor authentication and also biometric verification. But despite all these security improvements, cyber fraud continues to evolve. And with the rise of cryptocurrencies, this has introduced new avenues for financial scams, including what we already said, ICO's initial coin offerings. rug pull schemes, and deepfake enhanced scams. So new technology brings new opportunities for criminals and also new opportunities for defenders. So criminals are using increasingly sophisticated tactics to manipulate individuals and institutions, and this is making it essential for cybersecurity professionals to stay ahead of emerging threats. One way to stay ahead of the threat is to learn about history, because we will see later in the slides, history repeats itself. Techniques are the same. So understanding the digital transformation of fraud is something that is really important when we're developing some robust defenses against modern cybercriminals. Okay, so let's check now on the psychological triggers that fraudsters have exploited consistently across the centuries. So in the first quadrant, we see greed and easy money. They're exemplified by schemes like already mentioned South Sea Bubble and modern Ponzi operations. And these frauds, they tap into one of the most powerful human motivators, and that's the desire for wealth without effort. Get rich schemes. So they promise really extraordinary returns while downplaying or concealing the associated risks. And the consistency of this approach across centuries suggests that the allure of something for nothing is deeply embedded in human psychology and consistently overrides rational risk assessment for many people. The second quadrant shows fear and urgency, which drive phishing attacks and emergency scams. And this leverage our tendency to make poor decisions under time pressure and emotional stress. And when we feel threatened or when we feel anxious, our critical thinking diminishes and we become more susceptible to manipulation. And cybercriminals, they understand this dynamic well, which is why phishing emails often create artificial time pressure with phrases like immediate action is required or account suspension is imminent. And this exploitation of fear-based decision-making has remained remarkably consistent from 18th century extortion schemes to modern ransomware attacks. The third quadrant highlights trust in authority, which enables impersonation frauds and deepfakes. Our tendency to comply with requests from apparent authority figures creates a persistent vulnerability that transcends technological change. In the 18th century, fraudsters they impersonated nobility or government officials. But today they spoof emails from executives or from IT departments, HR departments. And finally, the fourth quadrant shows social proof and bandwagon effect, which fuel market bubbles historically, and it drives everything from fake testimonials to cryptocurrency fear of missing out. And that's all same happening today. Um, the bottom line of this slide offers some timeless wisdom. So critical thinking and skepticism are key defenses. Just think of that. Despite all our technological advances in cybersecurity, these fundamental cognitive skills remain our most reliable protection against fraud. Critical thinking and skepticism are key defenses, not technology. So, looking at the legal reforms, we see how the first case of the South Sea bubble disaster, how it prompted some of the first significant stock market regulations. And this catastrophic fraud revealed the need for systemic protections much rather than relying solely on individual vigilance. Today's security laws, the disclosure requirements, and financial regulations are the direct descendants of these early efforts. And in cybersecurity, we can draw a parallel to how major data breaches have driven regulatory frameworks like GDPR, for instance, and also some different industry-specific compliance requirements. The second thing here, the anti-forgery measures, they were developed in the 18th century, and they represent early efforts at what we now call authentication and non-repudiation. As counterfeiting became more sophisticated, banks and governments, they responded with increasingly complex security features on banknotes and official documents. And these innovations, like special papers, watermarks, some intricate designs, and security threads, they all established the concept of layer security that remains fundamental to modern information protection. And our digital authentication methods are conceptually similar. They're creating distinctive markers that are difficult for attackers to replicate. The third thing is public awareness. Um, so public awareness efforts, they began with early newspapers exposing scams and warning readers about common deception tactics. And this tradition continues today through online resources that help educate consumers about emerging threats. The parallel to our field here in cybersecurity is really clear. Security awareness training and education, they all represent one of our most important defensive layers. And finally, law enforcement approaches to fraud investigation, they have been evolved from the Bow Street Runners. This was one of London's first police forces, which specialized in tracking down fraudsters, to today's specialized cybercrime units. And the methodological evidence-based approach to fraud investigation that was pioneered back in the 18th century, it laid the groundwork for modern digital forensics. And all these historical responses really demonstrate some consistent pattern of adaptation, with security measures evolving in response to criminal innovation. Okay, so let's check on the cybersecurity defense pyramid. Um, at the top of the pyramid is think before you click. And this reflects how modern phishing scams rely on triggering quick emotional responses that bypass critical thinking. And this connects directly to historical frauds that exploited impulsive decision making. The common thread across centuries is the exploitation of snap judgments, whether it's a fraudulent letter demanding immediate action in the 1970s or a phishing email creating artificial urgency today. The second level is beware secrecy and urgency. This one addresses how fraudsters use how they use time pressure and demands for confidentiality to prevent proper scrutiny of their schemes. And in the 18th century, con artists, they would insist that investment opportunities were time limited or that helping the Spanish prisoner required absolute discretion. Today's attackers, they use the same psychological triggers when they mark phishing emails as urgent or when they claim security issues must be addressed immediately. So, recognizing all these pressure tactics as red flags is a security principle that has remained valid across centuries of technological change. The third level, verify identities, it connects to our earlier discussion of impersonation frauds. Um, we have discussed the necklace, the diamond necklace affair, and this one succeeded because this guy, Cardinal Rohan, he failed to properly verify the Queen's involvement. So today's business email compromise attacks, they succeed when employees fail to verify seemingly legitimate requests from executives. And the fourth level, warns it's too good to be true. And if it's too good to be true, it probably is. So this is the timeless defense against schemes promising extraordinary rewards for minimal effort. And at the final level, use security tools. It reminds us to use security tools. It's acknowledging that while foundational security principles remain constant, we must implement them through continuously evolving technologies that is appropriate to our era. And let's reflect on three key insights from today's lecture. So first is tools change, but the scams remain the same. And this has been our consistent theme throughout this lecture. And while the technical mechanisms of fraud have evolved dramatically from handwritten letters to sophisticated digital impersonations, the fundamental deception strategies and psychological vulnerabilities that they exploit have remained remarkably stable. Second, recognizing historical patterns helps us protect us today. So throughout today's session, we have seen how modern cybercrimes often follow playbooks that were written centuries ago. The South Sea bubble, it established patterns that are still visible in cryptocurrency scams. The diamond necklace affair demonstrated social engineering tactics that business email compromise attackers continue to employ. The Spanish prisoner scam created a template that Nigerian prince emails follow almost exactly daily. So, by studying all these historical precedents, we develop a deeper understanding of the threats that we face today. And this perspective helps us see through technological complexity to recognize persistent fraud strategies. And finally, the third thing is digital literacy. So digital literacy and skepticism, they're really, really crucial in the fight against fraud. Despite all our technical advances in cybersecurity, our firewalls, IDS, IPS systems, encryption, multi-factor authentication, and AI-powered threat detection, critical thinking remains our most powerful defense. And I have a quote here from George Santayana, who was a writer and philosopher from the early 20th century. The quote is, "Those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it." And this captures why this historical perspective matters so much to this field today. And with this, we will finish today's webinar here. And if there are any questions, we can discuss and we can talk more about this. But here are also some questions for you. Have you ever encountered any scams that resemble historical frauds? And also, how can we apply all these lessons to modern cybersecurity? And this is something that should be guiding you in your organizations. If you're working in the cybersecurity field, this is something that should be guiding you when you're trying to find solutions to your security challenges. And you know that you have to do risk assessments, assess threats and vulnerabilities, and make some decisions. Not everything is buying technology. This is where you should apply so-called holistic approach. Focus on technology, focus on people, focus on processes. So never neglect the human factor. Human factor is the key. Critical thinking. Just think of that. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Tom. I have a question actually, because as you said, history repeats itself, but it looks like we never learn. We always fall in the same scams. But how do you think companies nowadays are up to defend themselves from a technology, especially when it comes to AI? Are we there yet? Are the companies really capable of understanding some of the biggest scams?
Yeah, I've seen personally, both as a security officer, consultant, as a professor. Also, when we are talking to our students, every company is a little bit different, and every company is on a different maturity level. There are companies with excellent security culture, which means their maturity level is high, which means they're investing lots of resources into proactive approach instead of being reactive. Those companies understand the human factor, the importance of continuous education, awareness training, raising different exercises in security. So all these are important factors. But there are also companies that still don't get it. They think we are small, we are not interesting to anyone until something happens. And they get ransomware, and suddenly it's like only one hit is enough, for you to lose everything. And when it happens, it's already too late because they don't have backups. They're trying to put blame on other people, for their misfortune. So the best thing is, holistic approach. Make sure you develop your security culture, which leans closely on corporate culture. So security is part of the corporate culture. Focus on proactivity and focus also on the human factor, because human factor is your first line of defense in the company. Then comes everything else.
Okay, thank you so much. There is actually another question from the audience. Well, one is about the PhD in cybersecurity. I can answer that. We are working as well. The next step will be also launching some PhD, so we will come to that in the near future. And another one is really for you, Tom, is like with the advance of generative AI, how can we effectively combat AML related fraud, where the fraudster can create fake statements with a high level of accuracy to complete KYC AML checks? Is there something inherent within the current best practices that we can be leveraged, or do we need to get creative?
My favorite question, because AI is perfect actually in cybersecurity. And I really like to talk about AI in cybersecurity and cybersecurity in AI, only because the principles are the same. So everything that's applicable to cybersecurity, it's applicable also to AI. All the principles are the same. So when you have this combination between AI and cybersecurity, you get really powerful tool. But what we have seen from the history lesson today, that fraudsters also use AI. And yes, they use this to create convincing KYCs and lots of nasty stuff. And the question was about anti-money laundering. Definitely, every company that has proper risk management understands the value of acquiring new tools, because how do you fight AI? You fight AI with AI, obviously. But this is something, where for financial institutions, it's actually more difficult than for fraudsters. Fraudsters, they have no regulation. Financial institutions, they do have lots of regulation, and they really have to be careful how they deal with personal data, where they store information in the cloud or somewhere else. So this is really, really complicated for financial institutions, and it takes more time for them to deploy appropriate tools. And in spite of how much we try to catch up with fraudsters, they'll be always one step ahead of us, unfortunately. But the thing is, we always need to invest in people, in technology, follow trends. It's important to participate in lessons like this, if nothing else, but to raise awareness about this issue. Um, but AI, definitely, use AI, and sometimes you have to develop your custom tools. You cannot buy something off the shelf, because every company is a little bit different. And it's important that management boards also understand this race with AI, because things are developing much faster than ever before. So basically, what was happening within a year, now it's happening within a month. Just look at everything relevant for AI. Only last week, there's so many news. If you don't read and don't follow, if you're not part of different communities for a couple of weeks, you completely lose track of everything. It's really hard to follow all this information. So it's really important that you have layered security, especially AML, fraud management, definitely layered security that has its own control mechanism, that has advanced tools. there are companies providing services like that, but this also takes effort. So the best thing is, you get a consultant, somebody who is in the field, and that person can probably help you find the best solution or help you design your internal solution. I know that people that work in financial institutions, they're overloaded with work, and just by doing your daily work, you don't have time for vision, creating new practices. This really takes lots of time. As you said, in AI, things go much faster, and there is more stress on people. And when people are stressed, they're vulnerable. And here we go again, opportunity for fraudsters, because we are vulnerable. So I hope I answered the question.
I think you did, but in case the person who wrote can just get back and just say something else if they want to. There are two more questions. One is from Andrew. He says, this is Andrew, very interesting lecture on history of fraud. Do you envisage total breakthrough in fraud management and prevention?
Do I visit what, sorry?
A total breakthrough in fraud management. Yeah.
Well, fraud is something that is developing really, really fast. So basically, every year I go to some of the major conferences on fraud, and I'm also part of the program committee of some of the conferences that work in fraud. So actually, you can see all the developing and breakthroughs, both from criminals, but also from companies. So this is race, it's always like you're trying to catch up, So this is. There's no bulletproof solution, but it's always layered approach. And as we said, things happen so quickly, so it's important that you keep adding. Once you finish your project, you implement new tools, you are ready to start with something else already. And this is what management board needs to understand. It's going so much, it's much faster than ever before, and you're basically running with time here.
So it's a continuous breakthrough.
It's a continuous breakthrough, yes.
Okay.
I mean, they're always. If you look if you look at AIs, 2 years ago, criminals developed something called fraud GPT, which was used to generate emails, to find loopholes. But now we have the rise of adaptive malware, something that scans for 0 days, adapts malware and suddenly all the protections that you have is relevant because this will find already new loopholes. And the same thing is now with fraud. There are new tools. Warm GPT, I think this is the latest tool that was being developed. There are more tools, but everything is used just to fraud you. And financial institutions, they really have a tough job here in defending. And it also gets expensive to defend and stressful. Yeah.
We have a question from one of our students of the bachelor, actually. So is Matt. He's saying, what sort of career opportunities are available in the cybersec anti-fraud? He's talking about OPIT students, but in general, maybe you can link it.
Well, for people that want to work in fraud, there are actually many opportunities, from financial institutions, card processors, even health systems. Fraud is everywhere. We don't associate fraud only with financial institutions. Fraud is basically everywhere. Even in retail, there is fraud, different type of fraud. But everybody is now some in online business or somewhere. So there are many opportunities to work in fraud, on all levels.
Yes, this is booming actually, Matt, if I can say. And just for you in the final, then I'll talk shortly about the degrees. In the final part of your bachelor degree is the project work, and in that the capstone project where you can do actually a project with a company. And Tom is actually in contact with many different companies that are always looking for people working in the field. And there is one person from the audience who's thanking you for the answer and for today's lesson. It resonates with the direction of my current employer.